Good morning. All of you are already bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and commenting. I see all kinds of wonderful people, and I love that you guys are all talking and having your own conversation. How is everybody? We just had hold on, I have something going on in the background of my computer. I allowed my daughter to have a sleepover last night. A very social distancing sleepover. They slept in the backyard in tents 6 feet apart, and pounding on my door at 5 a.m. our sprinklers went off. So I had to send kids home to their parents wet at 5 a.m. So I'm still recovering from that. Good morning, good morning. Let's see. Somebody just asked, Kelly asked, hey, I noticed last week people were retracting their messages. Should I just set up a fake name? That's a great question. It's one I never thought of. And I know, Facebook is a major concern. If you're openly commenting on our Facebook page, good morning, Doug. Good morning, Stephanie and Kelly and Sarah. Jessica, Gigi, Randy. I know Facebook is a big concern. I have seen people's entire Facebook subpoenaed, and even private messages you've sent and deleted, anything you've ever written in a private group, a secret group. Facebook is a huge concern to me. And so even though I have the private groups on Facebook, I tell people all the time, anything you put in writing, I don't care, anywhere it's on the internet, on any social media channels, it could wind up in court. So you should always be very, very cautious. A lot of people have fake names so that, I have clients who, their mom has set up an email address for them to use with a different name for Facebook profiles. I've never thought of it in terms of YouTube, but you may want to look into that. Having somebody else set up an email address for you could keep it from being traced to you. I am of the mindset of being, I really screwed up the first time I commented on Facebook. Here's the thing, and people, we've chosen at One Mom's Battle to keep our Facebook page open to the public. And we get a lot of really upset messages from people about that because they'll write things on Facebook and it ends up in their court file on our One Mom's Battle page. Our Facebook page has been open to the public since 2011, and I purposely keep it that way because we have lots of family court professionals who follow along, who are learning right alongside of us. There are some really good humans that work in the family court industry despite the bad rap that they all get. And so, there's a variety of reasons that we keep it open. Another reason, this topic, if it is kept in the dark, we are never going to raise awareness. But I'll tell you, I cringe all the time when I see things that people write and share, and we try to remind people it's a public page. But here's where I was going with that. Even if you are in the most locked down, unsearchable Facebook secret group, if you get subpoenaed, that's all going to end up in court. And I will tell you, I've also seen private secret groups be compromised by ex-husbands, by new fiancés, by new partners, whatever it is. It's really, that's why, with our state chapters, I require people to send me their ID, a picture of their driver's license, their case number. Not that I can, do the legwork to truly verify, but if there was ever an issue, I want to know that everybody I admitted into that group is who they say they are. And that's why with, our private forum, the Lemonade Club, we actually do phone screenings with each and every person. If we have any red flags about their application, we don't even do a phone screening. So, you just have to be careful anywhere, anytime you're online. Be really careful. I took a huge risk back then in 2010 when I started my blog, 2011. I had no idea the repercussions that I could have faced by doing that. And I hit the jackpot when it comes to judges who honored my right to free speech. And I was really careful. I wasn't on there bashing my ex-husband. I was sharing my story and my frustrations with the system. And sometimes that even involved the judge. But had I had a very narcissistic judge and I was on there writing the things that I was writing, I there's a huge chance I could have lost my children. And if I could go back, I would do it completely different. I would never have used my real name. So, Dr. Susie says, what should I not be putting online? I would like to tell my story, but be careful. Talk to your attorney. And there's my fine print disclaimer. I'm not an attorney. I cannot give legal advice. We're just here as a survivor community coming together, sharing stories, sharing experience and wisdom, but ultimately check with your attorney on anything like that. The reality is, and it can really, if you have a judge who has very high narcissistic traits, or who just believes, right now with the way the internet is, our kids have access to everything online. Back then, it was limited. And so we're in a different world, even though it's just 10 years later. The reality is, I think it would be a different story if I was openly talking about my story with my kids being minors. I think it really could have had a different effect. So as much as I want people, somebody just sent me a book they wrote. As much as I want people to speak up and tell their stories, because that's how we bring these issues from the darkness to the light, I don't want it to affect your case. And I have seen people lose their kids over social media posts. Because if the kids have access to social media, all the other side has to do is say they're alienating, they're openly speaking poorly about the other parent in a small community. It's really, really difficult. It's a scary endeavor. And I know 2016, I received a cease and desist from my ex-in-laws. And those of you who have been with me since back then, I had to launch a GoFundMe account with Christy Brinkley's help, and we raised $14,000 in 2 days so that I could hire Lisa Bloom to fight this cease and desist letter. We never even made it into court, but it cost over $12,000 for an attorney to just fire back. It was an amazing letter that the Bloom firm wrote, but anybody can sue anyone. And if somebody tries to sue you for defamation, slander, anything in that category, you have to defend yourself. And I'll tell you, it wasn't what I wanted to deal with, but I didn't have a choice. And luckily it just, we responded, and but it was a very expensive response. Anyway, let's dive into the questions. So for those of you who are new, you can submit questions through my Instagram at One Mom's Battle, or through, we have a Gmail address set up called coffeedatewithtina@gmail.com. We have a lot of questions waiting. There are a lot of people who are going through this who, it's not it's an isolating journey. And so many of us, there's no, I always say there's no rule book. We're all just winging it. And that's a scary thing to be doing when your kids' lives are on the line. So anytime we can all come together like this, and I always say I don't have all the answers. And sometimes a question that is asked, somebody in our community in the comments may have the answer. And so make sure you're watching all the comments, that you go through all the comments, because we have some really amazing warriors who have been on the battlefield for quite a while, and they may have the answer to your question. So the first question is, how do you heal from triggers? And that's probably going to be different for everybody. And I'd love to hear your answers in the comments as well. I'll tell you, for me personally, it hasn't been a one-stop shop approach. It's been a lot of trial and error. Some things that have worked don't work for other situations. Here's a perfect one that I can actually share from this morning, where I am still triggered. My daughter, my youngest daughter, who's now 13, she had night terrors during the trauma and during, that point in our lives where things were really, really bad. And so me getting woken up in the middle of the night by my daughter, it just sends me. I am so triggered. I am PTSD. It was such a traumatizing part of our journey. And so at 5 a.m. this morning, when she's having a sleepover in the backyard and she's pounding on the door going, "Mom," I elevated. I feel like I'd left my body. I was so triggered. My heart's beating. I was actually excited to know it was just sprinklers. She was not thrilled, but for me, it was so triggering. And that's one that I'm very aware of. I need to work on. It's hard because it doesn't come up often. But for me, it's been meditation. It's been EMDR therapy. There was a point in my battle after for those of you who joined last time, my ex-brother-in-law was arrested in 2016 for child molestation. And there was a point in time right after his arrest that I was so triggered, I could not even drive 30 minutes north to the town where he lived, which is Paso Robles, because it brought back memories of me having to drive my children there, being forced by the court system, even though I knew he was so dangerous, and having to drop my daughters off with this horrible, toxic, evil family. And so I would have panic attacks as soon as my car was pointing north on the freeway. And I was going through intensive therapy with a local psychologist to try to work through all of that. And one of the things that she had me do was plan an excursion up there. And so I just happened to find there was an art class going on around Valentine's Day, and it was creating a heart. And so I forced myself into the car. And she was having me label every single feeling, every single thought that came up as I was driving up the grade to Paso Robles. And I will tell you, I still have the art piece that I did, but it sounds, to anybody who hasn't gone through this, it sounds so bizarre that it was such a huge deal for me. But to go and sit in that art class, knowing that my ex-mother-in-law, still lived in that town, and everybody in the art class was about 10 years older than me. And all I kept thinking as I sat there, she's going to walk in any minute. And I actually got up, I walked over to the instructor, and I reviewed her whole sign-in sheet, because I thought I'm gonna literally crawl out of my skin and die. It's not gonna, if she's on this list, I'm probably gonna leave here in a straitjacket. And it was the most overwhelming feeling for me, but pushing myself through it. 6 months prior to that, I wouldn't have been able to do it, but I had worked up to that over time. And So it was desensitizing myself to Paso Robles not being a scary place, and that there were positive experiences to be made. A lot of it, I've had a lot of experiences like that here in my community, living in the same place with my ex and my in-laws. And for me, it's, when I'm out in public, going, okay, that is fear. I see you, fear. I am staring you straight in the eyes, and I'm going to plow right through you, and sitting with it and letting it ride through. And I still don't have it perfected. There are still triggers and buttons that will send me. My husband will tell you that. My daughter's therapist told Glenn about 2 years ago, you live in a house filled with landmines, PTSD landmines with these girls and your wife. You've got a job ahead of you because you have to navigate that. And it's very true, that analogy. And so we're all in this together, and I'm even still healing and still learning. So find what works for you, whether that's meditation. The meditation part, I have found, I used to tell myself for years, I can't meditate, I'm not a candidate for it. And my therapist said, the people who struggle with meditation or believe they can't are the ones who need it the most. And so sometimes, even if it's just 2 minutes of sitting on my bathroom floor and watching my thoughts and escorting them out, and kind of acknowledging them, and then saying, you can leave now, you're not welcome here. It's a journey. So start with a good therapist, someone who is very trauma informed. And one of the only benefits that I can see to this pandemic, well, there's a few, but is, so many therapists have gone towards teletherapy, Zoom, that type of thing. And Gigi says, restorative yoga saved me. Yeah, find what works for you, and that's that connecting the body and the mind. Yoga is fantastic. But the pandemic has opened the doors to where you're not isolated to a therapist right in your own county. You might be able to see somebody halfway across the state. And so it opens you up to more options, more therapists who are trauma informed. And I should say, if you have a therapist who is very trauma informed, who understands these things, and should be on our Friends of OMB list, please, please let me know. We finally got our Friends of OMB database in a really good place, and it's my goal to add to that and create resources for everybody. And so if you have a therapist, if you have an attorney who really understands what this is, email me, and you can send it to Friends of OMB, One Mom's Battle, Friends of OMB at gmail.com. Get their permission first, because we've listed a few attorneys who email me and say, I don't want to be known for this. I don't want to advertise myself and open my doors to dealing with a bunch of narcissists. So check with them first, but we would love to add them to the list. We have some great people on there, and I'd love to keep adding to that. So next question. And I love that you guys are asking questions over to the side too and getting answers from each other. I love this group. I really do. I think at some point we should schedule for all the Coffee with Tina regulars, we should schedule a Zoom call where we can all see each other. And actually, because it's lonely. I just see myself. It's weird. So maybe we'll set that up next year. Okay, next question. How can I help my kids when they are scared to advocate for themselves? That's a topic that comes up a lot, and I think it's a really important topic for us to talk about. A lot of people feel frustrated that their kids are talking to them, sharing with them how they feel about the unhealthy parent, but then they won't take a stand and they cower. When my marriage ended, I was a 34-year-old woman with a toolbox full of self help and everything else and a good therapist. I didn't feel comfortable standing up to this person. Um, I still don't feel comfortable. I still, would be triggered if I had to have a face to face. So, expecting our kids to take that kind of a stand, and I don't think that's the exact question. Um, you know, how do we support our kids though, in general? The biggest thing is getting them in with a really skilled therapist. And I had this conversation with a client yesterday, because she expressed frustration that her kids are playing board games with the therapist. They're not really, and I hear that a lot. So it's not isolated to this client. That people feel frustrated that they're not seeing a ton of progress. When we're looking at therapy for kids, it's a slow process. There's a lot of rapport building and really building that trust, so when really big things come up, they can feel comfortable sharing. So I always think of, if you make any progress in the first year, any major progress, that's kind of a miracle. I think of kids therapy as an ultra marathon. Um, and so in expecting a child's therapist to get it like right out of the gate or even within the first year is a tall order. I try to remind people she doesn't know you, and she or he doesn't know either of you. For all this therapist knows, you could be a pathological liar. Why should they believe us just because we're the mom or dad or whatever it is? That's where I feel like managing our expectations appropriately comes into play. And I know when you're in it, it's hard to do that. Um, but there are some realities to the system that we have to be operating from a realistic expectation. But getting your kids in with a good therapist, and that doesn't mean the therapist is going to say dad's a great guy or mom's a great person and we need to like figure, it's my goal when I started my kids in therapy was to fill their toolbox. And I think I've said that to therapists is I don't care, yes, I'm in a high conflict custody situation. We are still in family court. I have no intention of ever calling you onto the stand, and I'll sign something that says that. My goal in being here today is so that my child has an outlet and a safe, neutral third party to talk to, whether it's an issue in my house or his house. And that's my goal. My goal is for my child to walk in here with this empty little toolbox and leave with so many tools that they're going to be able to navigate any situation in life, not just related to their unhealthy father. Equipping my child with boundaries, knowing how to listen to their inner voice, knowing, because our kids, they're blank slates. They don't know that if this and this happens, this is what I could do, this is what I could say. Those are life lessons that we've all had that, just come naturally to us, or we can at least go backwards and pull it out and go, oh, this would be applicable for this situation. And so empowering our kids, my goal with my kids in therapy was that they came out of this divorce, this high conflict divorce, as unscathed as possible. That they were people who recognize unhealthy behaviors, that they are happy, that they have tools, that they are emotionally centered and regulated, and all of those things. And so I think being realistic about therapy in general is really important. Finding a trauma informed therapist for your kids. I know a lot of times the other parent tries to block therapy, And so, a lot of clients will go to their pediatrician and say, these are the behaviors, these are the things that I'm dealing with. Do you recommend therapy? And then if you do you have a list of names or recommendations that you could give me? And then get that in writing, because in some states, I know in California, a pediatrician's recommendation can kind of trump the other parent in court. I don't know the exact legalities. That's not my area of expertise. So check with your attorney, but there are ways around it. And then I have a lot of clients who they are blocked from getting their kids therapy. So what they will do is find a really good child therapist who is trauma informed, who understands cluster B, and they will themselves meet with this person for tools, for resources. Um, and just teaching our kids, we have physical boundaries, we have mental boundaries, we have emotional boundaries, spiritual boundaries. What does it look like when somebody is crossing one of those boundaries? And then that's a red flag. If you set out a boundary and somebody plows through that, that's a red flag for that person. And so, having open conversations with our kids that don't relate to the other parent. That's where people go really wrong. Our kids need to be taught about unhealthy people, but not pointing the finger at the other parent, just in general, because there's a lot of them in this world. So strengthening our kids, empowering our kids. And I know there's a lot of great comments and advice going on in the sidebar. Deanna says, as a former school social worker, I'm now teaching my daughter coping skills, advocacy, when not to speak up to her father, but hold it in her mailbox. So it's incredibly hard, but it's so important. That's interesting. I want to hear more about the mailbox. Is that something that would be delivered to her therapist? Is that where that's being sent or held for? I like that analogy though. COVID canned responses, Jessica. I would love to do that. I absolutely would. I haven't had the capacity. I know you've asked about that and other people have too. If anybody else has COVID canned responses, Yellow Rock responses, feel free to post them. It's hard because every situation is so different. I actually want to do some revisions on our regular canned responses because some of them I personally wouldn't recommend sending. They're a little too harsh, but that's also buried on the to-do list. I will get to it though. That's one of my goals. Next question. How do I handle false accusations? I know for me personally, so let's say my ex-husband sends me an email and he says, you're alienating the kids, blah, blah, blah. My response, especially back in the beginning when that was such a new term to me, would be, hey, Seth, I'm very perplexed by your accusation. When I look up the term alienation, I'm trying to understand how it fits in our situation. Maybe you can give me a couple of examples to help me understand your perspective. Because usually they can't. They throw things out there to see what sticks. And most of the time, nothing sticks. They try hard though. So I like following the Yellow Rock communication strategy mentality. I offer a course on strategic communication. And by next week, it'll be on the website, available for immediate download. I just did the course the other night, so it's not available right now, but check back next week. But it's very much, presenting yourself in your authentic truth, which is perplexed. I am perplexed. I will never understand a toxic human who is weaponizing my child in an effort to hurt me or to control me. That will never make sense to me. I I will never not be perplexed. So when I'm writing something like that, I am operating from my place of authentic truth. I'm being very friendly because I'm writing for the court, not for him. I'm not going to give him the power to engage with him at that level, because that ends up making me look like part of the conflict. And I'm not going to do that. So I'm going to show up rocking my role as a co parent, because that's who I am as my authentic truth. And I'm going to say, hey, you know what? I want to understand your perspective. Can you share some examples? And that type of situation can be used in a variety of situations. False allegations, when they make their way into the courtroom, I, you know, I depending on whether or not I felt that they rose to the level of concern for the court. I learned to pick my battles wisely. There was some things that I just didn't even respond to because I knew it didn't matter to the court. I knew he didn't have proof anyway. But the hard part is when you are a good person who values, honesty, and, you show up in the world as a good citizen, any attack on your character can really spin you. And that's where knowing your truth comes in, and it's really important. Tina, I will send a resource I'm using. She gives great advice in regards for my children during high conflict situations. I would love to send it to my tina@tinaswithin.com email. I am always, we have a resource area on the One Mom's Battle website, and the site is pretty new. I mean, we've always had a site, but we just had it redone. Ironically, the company that did it is called Lemonade Hype. Totally unrelated to me, but it was meant to be. So she's created a resource area, and anything like that, I would love to add to the website. My goal is to make the One Mom's Battle website a one-stop shop for everybody who is going through this type of situation. So, I chose my battles wisely in court. That was one of the things that I pride myself on. Um, there was a point where I've shared this before. My ex was basically accusing me of having a revolving door of men in my kids' lives, and that matters to the court if that's true, but he had no proof, and it had no basis in reality. So I did respond to that with factual information. So I think it really depends on how significant the accusation is. Remember, stand firm in your truth, and then, look at it through the lens of the family court system. When they are seeing horrific abuse and hearing allegations of unimaginable things on a weekly basis, is this going to truly matter to them? That's an important piece that so many of us miss, myself included, in the beginning. So check in with yourself on that. And the last question for the day, should we warn the narcissist's next victim to keep their kids away from him? I personally don't recommend going down that path at all, because when I see people do that, it backfires. The other party can then take that correspondence, because you have to remember, go back in time to when you believed wholeheartedly in this person, that he was the Prince Charming that he was presenting himself to be. You were looking at the world through the lens he was holding for you. That's what she's doing right now. And so she probably believes you are a crazy person who is trying so hard to keep this poor guy's kids away from him, all of those things. I don't know your situation or how dangerous he is to be around kids in this capacity. I don't know. All I can say is for myself personally, and what I see is that when people engage the new feed supply, Um, I know if somebody would have reached out to me, my ex-husband's old ex-girlfriends, I would have never believed them, because I was looking at things through his lens. And so then, in my opinion, he is going to take that correspondence and paint you as bitter and jealous and jaded and not accepting of him moving forward, and then that just puts you in a negative light for the court. I'll tell you, I've had multiple ex-girlfriends from my ex-husband reach out to me for help after the fact, after the relationship ended, and I I have mixed feelings on that whole topic, because he has chosen some really interesting people. I'll tell you that after me, and I don't know how much I'll engage with his future partners, because I have come to realize they're not always the healthiest people either. Um, so that's my short answer. Let's see some of the comments. Randy says, no, but I warned my son's friends' parents not to let their teenage daughters around him because he will try to sleep with them. That's terrifying. And yeah, I would probably, if I felt safe saying something like that, I don't think I'd put it in writing, but would I have that conversation and just plant that seed if that was a concern for me? Yeah, that's a big one. Um, all right, everybody. I am heading off to my Saturday, and I hope all of you have a great weekend. I hope you find time to put on your own oxygen mask so that you can show up and be the rocks that your kids need you to be. And I will see you next Saturday. I think there is a Saturday I might not be here in October, but I'll let everybody know ahead of time. And I'm scheduling them now in advance. So not only will you be able to set a reminder through YouTube, but I'm actually posting the questions in advance so you know what we're going to be talking about. So I look forward to seeing you all next Saturday. Take care.